The amount of intelligences and abilities and strengths and superpowers that we focus on in conventional school is so thin.
And life is such a relational, experience. It's all relationships. And so to me, school is one of the most important places to develop relationship skills because that becomes our future.
Welcome back to the next episode of Education is Life. Got a super exciting guest today. We got Mitchel Bleier with us, who is not only a parent of a Griffin at Greenfields, but he has also just recently come on staff and helped out with admissions and talking to other families and outreach. And he's got a great story. His family's got a great story. We love to have him on board. Love to have his child on board with us too. Welcome to the show, Mitchel.
Thanks, Rob. So glad to be here.
Why don't you tell us about how you found Greenfields, what you were looking for, and what it's like having been there so far. Have you been there, about a year and a half now?
We showed up on Halloween, which is a really funny day to have as your first day of school, all dressed up in costume, of 2019. So yeah, like a year and a half or so. Well, my story or my family's story to finding Greenfields kind of starts with our oldest son, who is now graduated from college, but it wasn't such an easy journey through the educational system for him. And at that time, we were living in Connecticut, and we were in these blue ribbon public schools, and there was so much pressure, and it was a great school, but totally the wrong school for him. And it opened our eyes to different school options, for our kids. And myself, I was a public school my whole life from suburbs of Detroit. And I thought it was such a great value to be in the public school because I had so much diversity. There was such a mixture of different cultures in this school. And I thought that was really important. And so I really thought the public school systems could be a wonderful thing. And I learned that it just wasn't for our oldest son. At that same time, our youngest son, who's at Greenfields, was around 4, and he was in a private school, a friend's school, which I was so all about the culture of it. And they just kept telling us this is the wrong school for him. And they asked him to get tested and that he just wasn't, fitting in as an individual amongst the group, didn't know how to interact. So we pulled him and put him into the public schools in Connecticut because he could get integrated services. And, for preschool, that was wonderful. Kindergarten, it was okay. And then we moved to Chicago. And when we landed in Chicago, he didn't have services for the first year. And then he did, but they really weren't any services. They were just meetings about services, but there were really none applied. And he was so lost. First, second, third, fourth grade, it was really a disaster. We started to watch his anxiety levels go up and his complete just sadness to go to school, every day, not so uncertain with what the social situations meant. The academic was unfulfilling. He was afraid to have any voice. And it was really stressful for my wife and I, and having witnessed firsthand what that was like for a high schooler, middle school and high schooler for so many years. And we made it a really big priority in our life to listen to our, 10-year-old at that time or 11-year-old and hear what he was saying and not just, discredit him because he was young and, he had to suck it up. We really sat there and said, is this the modeling and the message we want to tell our child, that this is life? It's hard, deal with it. We all went through it. And is that going to be his educational life? And then is that going to be his life, through college? And then he's going to get a job he doesn't really like and a marriage he doesn't really want to be in, but you got to just suck it up and do it because that's what everybody does. And at some point he's going to find agency that he's unhappy in life. And we did not want that. So we started exploring different schools. And a friend of ours had said, you might really like Greenfields. And we had never heard of it. And we called up, and my wife, I think, talked to you, Rob, and we were probably in the office within 2 hours because CPS was on strike. And when we walked in, there was something about the feeling. You walk into someone's home that's put so much love into it, and the feeling, the care, the thoughtfulness. It wasn't like walking into, that modern mansion, or something like that, like that you're eyeing from the outside going like, oh my God, that must be the greatest home. But you walk in, it's totally cold and sterile. This was just like walking into a familiar place.
I wonder why it is like they make school buildings, traditional school buildings, feel like places that are supposed to be imposing, right? It's like the courthouse where you're supposed to feel small when you go in because it's like there's bigger things at play here than you. Like, why would you choose that as a place to create for young people to go to learn?
I don't know. It's a really good
Because I
question.
never thought about it that way. It's just crazy.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't seem like they originally were like that one room schoolhouse, felt, you know, quaint and cozy. But yeah, like you look at these big schools, they look semi-prison like, and like you're locked into this room and these hallways, and anything that's out of place is, it's like fear driven. And when we walked into Greenfields, it was so, there was so much kindness, and it's not a big place. We look around and there's like things are spilling over and this and that, and but it's like, but it felt like kids were really comfortable here, just from the foyer itself, and how they all had their place there. And when we came into your office, there was an immediate sense of, you understood kids. Like you understood how to communicate and how to listen to children. And it wasn't just about dismissing the kids and hearing the parents and, wanting to sell us. It was, you were really, observing our son and noticing the things that would soothe him. And then you were handing him more things. Oh, you like that? What about this? Do you like this? And, and the way that you approached him, there was not an ounce of feeling like there was ever going to be shame. And I even remember like the first day he came and, hanging up his coat, like all these things, like, right, parents aren't allowed to come in at drop off. Like it's all about this independence. And that was such a challenge, because we're so used to having a son who has fine motor challenges or this kind of challenge, and, and the struggle. And it's like, we're in this time oriented society, and, just, get it in, and it has to be perfect. And this, and you were just like, yeah, here's a hanger. And you just were so patient, like just kind of like, yeah, what's a strategy? Oh, that's really hard for me too. I tend to like zip my coat. I remember all this, like I find if I zip my coat, maybe it's a little bit easier to kind of get it on the hanger. And then, and then finally, like he was just struggling, and he just realized if he took the tag, like, hang on a hook, and he just kind of put that over the hook of the hanger, then, and you were like, yeah, that works. Like there was never like this feeling like you had to do something one way. Like there was so many ways to fit in and to be celebrated. And there wasn't ever the sense of shame. And we were immediately just like, this is the place, like we found a home for our son to be there. And I remember when he went, he came back and was like, everybody's nice, like it was like the culture. And I don't even think he knows of, the idea of culture, especially at that point, but he immediately felt like there was a shift in the culture. Like people were nice, and he felt a part of something. And then that feeling of being a part of something gave him more confidence, to take on those roles that Greenfields really encourages, like leadership, to lead, workshops, or to lead meetings, or and then to even want to do that, to want to keep developing, to have those skill sets and badges to be able to do that. And then that started to become a huge shift in our own home. Like one of the features of Greenfields that we really value is that it's not a homework driven, school. So that when you come home from school, you can be a kid, you can seek your own curiosities, and you can also have family time, which for us is really important. And we always, I think you said to us in the meeting, like, could you imagine like if you got a job and you were getting paid to go to work from 9 to 5, but then they gave you 4 extra hours of work that they're not paying for you for every night? Like you wouldn't stay in that job. But that's our school system, and our families buy into it, and how many fights and how much stress is over our kids doing their homework, and this and that. So our whole home life became so much easier. And then we watched the anxiety go away. We watched the joy of getting up and not fighting to go to school in the mornings, but it being something independently driven. And over the year and a half, like, we're watching progress. Sometimes it plateaus and then it just exponentially jumps. But I think that's really normal in life for all of us as humans. And it's just been such a treat to witness. And as a parent, seeing your child in the right environment thriving, it's such a joy and also a feeling of relief. And sometimes that's a challenge in our society of what is your child accomplishing. Like, why is happiness and not being stressed not like at the top of those list of accomplishments, versus what grades or test scores or place that you're on, the team or this or that. It's to me, like, this is the greatest thing as a parent, and to be able to share in that and to unlearn parenting in some regard. That's what Greenfield's also teaching me. Like, I now am learning that my child is so capable that I don't need to step in and micromanage and do all these things. And that actually the process of learning is as much about not getting it right, and not being perfect. That's been an unlearning process as a parent. And it's another just thing I'm just grateful for, because now I'm seeing he has the resources, the skills, and the ability to start doing more and more things on his own. So it's been a tremendous journey, in finding the school and what it's offered to us.
Yeah, it's definitely a change compared to how conventional school handles things, right? Where it doesn't start with the child first. It starts with a test score or a college admissions, or it starts with some far off outcome that everybody must do. And then it's broken down into these single age brackets, 50-minute hours by different subject matters. There is nothing that they're going to encounter after school that's anything like what school has become. We're doing anything except preparing them with the skills they need to be successful in life. Arguably, the aim is to make them successful in college, which I guess is supposed to make them successful in life. But that's just not the way the path works, right? And when you look at the advances in cognitive science and learning and everything else, like the best way to learn and to develop is first to feel safe and comfortable, right? And when it's all about grades and everything you do is going to be graded, and if you fail, it's going to go on your permanent record, it just drives the life out of the situation. And like what you said, no one would take a job like that. I think every parent should have to go and sit in a conventional school classroom for one day, not to observe, but to actually participate and do the part of being a student. And let's see how that goes, because what we put our kids through is it's unhealthy. And I was talking with someone the other day, and I was like, talking with a family, I was told that my son would probably do better in a smaller school because the people would have a chance to care about him. It's like, everybody's going to do better being around people who care about them and people who love them. Like, that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. It's like just standing up and saying, yeah, we don't really have time or the inclination or the heart or the system, whatever it is, to care. Because that slows us down, and we have to jam through this curriculum. We have to jam through this now. And whether you're falling behind or whether you're ahead, it doesn't matter. We're all going to just trudge through this together. Just having to recreate the whole idea of what that feeling is, whether it's from just having some couches that you want to work on the couch today. Great. Can you get your work done on the couch? Not everybody can. So figure that out. Or I liked your example. I had totally forgotten about him trying to hang up his jacket that first day. And, watching him struggle with it. And it's like, all right, what are you going to try next? It's like, but it builds that problem solving skill set. And you don't have to do it my way, right? And if you find a better way to do it or a way that works for you, That's great. And you've now also earned some authentic confidence that you were able to solve a problem on your own, whether it's a small problem like that, or as a bigger problem of I've fallen behind, or I don't know how to do this thing, or I'm having this problem with this person. Like, we love problems, whether they're intrapersonal, interpersonal, academic, experiential, whatever it is, because that's what you learn from. You learn from the struggle, uh, and to build an environment that gets everybody in that struggle, I think is so much more important. My oldest son is a little similar to the one you were talking about, where everything was so easy. He went to best schools, blah blah blah, and just being miserable,
Yeah.
and did not have the skills needed to be able to cope with the situation. Huge fear of failure, lots of anxiety. And that's not the kid who he was. That's the environment. And to get him kind of pulled back from that took a lot. But it's just such a healthier place to be. And yeah, and I'm starting to ramble a bit, but
Right.
I had this strange thought last night, or maybe it was this morning. That blurry line between waking up and not quite awake. One of the things that we use as a basis for our social emotional stuff is the work that was done by Seligman and Peterson out at University of Penn around well-being theory. And they have 5 pieces to the well-being theory. It's called PERMA. I should have now I'm going to share this story without any notes. So this is going to be helpful. Let's see, PERMA. Positive emotions, engagement, relationships, meaning, and achievement. And if you have those things, and they do most of their work with adults, right? But that's a well-being, that you really need to have all those things. Well, we don't give the kids any meaning for school.
Right.
The research shows their engagement levels are in the teens, with almost as many being actively disengaged, which means like undermining the system, as they're actively engaged.
Which is also in our businesses now too, right? It's like the number one reason corporations are suffering is disengaged employees.
Yeah, the relationships, we do nothing to help them build relationships. Meaning, yeah, we talked about that, no meaning. Positive emotion, hope you find someone, I'll give you a gold star. And then it's all just about the achievement thing, which was the last piece they added because a student of theirs brought it up to them. Like, well, what if you just like to achieve for achievement's sake? And like, that's a valuable thing of an entire well-being piece. So we'll put that in there.
It's achievement for achievement's sake, not achievement for somebody else's sake, right? That's the key there. It's like achievement that's work-based is the contract. Like, so the students are in a contract, like you're achieving this because you're giving us this answer. Like your example earlier was like problem solving. Well, it's great if there's so many different ways that you could solve the problem, and we celebrate a student, or anybody who came up with a solution other than this is the only one that we wanted.
Yeah, it's even the show your work, right? Where it's like, and I understand show your work when you're trying to coach somebody or work with somebody, but it's like, I don't know, so many of these concepts, I'm like, where am I? Like, I was a really good test taker. I want my test, right? As an adult, I want my test so I can get, but there's no test. There's no forced ranking. There's no grading. There's no any of that.
Yeah. You said something earlier about the fear and, like caring and all of that. And I mean, the fear is so driven in, right? Like, and I remember when my oldest was in middle school and he was trying out for travel basketball, and it was like the tryouts, and he was super nervous. And I was like, wow, tell me more about what it's like to be nervous, and what's that feel like in your body? So he's describing it, like the butterflies and like all the kind of angst and all this. And I'm like, God, that's how I feel like when I'm excited too. Isn't that weird that like nervous and excitement almost feel the same? I go, well, what do you think the difference is? Like, why are you nervous? And he said, because I think I'm going to fail. And I was like, I wonder if you would be excited if you were thinking you were going to succeed, and I think like so much of our population is driven on that fear of failing. So they're coming into things with their nervous system now, in more of a fight or flight kind of response. And how are we really ever to have any kind of healthy engagement if the nervous system that's controlling everything is wanting to flee or wanting to, somehow fight with what's there? How much of this is an environmental kind of concern that is pushing, the manifestation of behaviors we're seeing in kids today, more than it being like, a genetic or disposition, like you inherit this, like I'm just curious. And so like when I see Greenfields and I see an environment, you know the environment to me is so different, the caring, the space that I'm seeing a different set of behaviors turn on in my son over this time, that isn't needing services like that we used to have. He was, in OT twice a week and this and that, while we were in CPS, in public schools. We don't have any of that now. And so there's a huge, I know in science, they call this epigenetics, like how the environment really turns on and off gene expression. And I just wish that was taught or thought of more in our educational environments from young ages, rather than these are the benchmarks, these are the scores, these are the things we're looking for, but we're not looking to see how the environment is affecting these kids that we're now going to label this or that.
Yeah, so much of it. I mean, you from my 1894 spiel, right? So much of it just it goes back to this group of 10 old white men in 1894.
Could you imagine today, like how that would go?
Right. We're talking 125 years later, and all that's happened is the cement has been poured deeper and deeper around those foundations. And it's been poured by the same type of people who's like college admissions. This is what it takes to get into college. To the point we don't even do trade stuff at school anymore. Like it's like the amount of intelligences and abilities and strengths and superpowers that we focus on in conventional school is so thin. It's like, can you be popular? Can you read? Can you write? Can you do math? Can you be obedient? Right. I mean, this is like the end. Can you build something amazing? Do you have incredible persuasive powers? Are you a leader of people? Do people want to follow you? Are you great at making other people look good at what they do? Can you lift people up? Like all of these other, like much more important skills and strengths get basically told that they're worthless until hopefully they haven't been totally beaten out of you by the time you get into needing to find a way through life rather than just finding a way to survive school.
And life is such a relational, experience. It's all relationships, your relationship to yourself, your relationship, to what we put as the priority or work. Like you meet somebody, like, what do you do? Like, it's not like, who are you? Like it's like work somehow defines us. And like, where did that start in our life? And, I look at the relationships. That's the most like important feature of my life. And I feel like as somebody who's spent a life studying, how things connect, both internally and externally, relationships are the benchmark for me. And I look at our society and we have more divorce, more second divorce. We have relationships that are constantly failing. And yet we never look at like the systems where, we're sending ourselves and how that's impacting its implications, to who we become as adults. Like, I think school is a huge part of that. We're as humans, we model behavior, we model movements. The word emotion in Latin means from movement. So as we're watching how the people in front of us move, which is essentially, our kindergarten teachers and up, we're also learning how to relate to the world. And so to me, school is one of the most important places to develop relationship skills, modeling of those relationships, because that becomes our future. If we have good, healthy relationships and we know how to relate and how to connect, I think we can end up doing anything.
At school yesterday, the No, you've heard me say it before, but I would love to put every therapist out of business, right? How do we just start with, instead of creating baggage when we're younger, right? How can we authentically engage with who we are and what the human experience is so that we can have productive time later in life rather than carrying all that baggage around?
Yeah. Or those therapists have, a really great role to help us in times of real, struggle, but but
Right,
it's
crisis.
expedited, and it's like we don't, need to rely on it now for the rest of our life.
Yeah,
Occasionally.
no, the big winners out of how we handle conventional school are big pharma, therapists, and the educational industrial complex.
So you're,
There's a
yeah, just tackling the small stuff.
there's and it's when you look inside the big systems. This is why I stayed out of K-12 for so long. Is where do you even begin to try to make meaningful change in a conventional school, especially in a public school district? The amount it takes 10 years to make a change and 10 years to undo that change, and that's no way to keep up with what these kids are going to face. That accelerating change of the world is just so fast, and they get it, and they see it outside of school, and it just becomes like school just makes less and less sense to them of why it's happening and what's going on and how it's important.
Then I imagine you add into that those people that are primarily looking outside of the traditional school are looking at religious private schools, as the number one place that you send. So that's also just kind of passing on tradition.
Yep. Most people who are going to parochial schools are going for what they believe is a lack of moral-based education.
Right.
And often for that love, right? They feel like their child's just going to be cared about more. The old days of the nun with the ruler are pretty much gone.
Nice to hear.
I'm sure if that's what you still want, you can find that school for you. But it's still like the best schools, like pick the best school, like the blue ribbon schools. Like we have a blue ribbon school up around the corner here, right? And they are missing out on the potential of what all those kids can do by so much because it all gets pushed down into that small academic piece of life. My daughter's going to one. When she went into high school, we didn't have a high school program yet at Greenfields. And her colleagues of that time are like, it's so much easier than Greenfields. And, it doesn't make sense. I just like to go hang out with my friends. And so the stuff that she's really interested in learning about, she does at home and on her own time. School is just one of those check mark boxes now that she has to get through, which is just like,
that must break your
it's
heart.
Sad, but it's sad, but at least if you can get through it quickly enough, at least you have a chance to maybe do some of the relationship side and make some friends and do some of those pieces. But if you struggle in that box, not only are you not reaching what your potential could be, it's being stifled away from what other people are getting out of that box.
And it's so inefficient, like the process, particularly the high school. Like I have a couple podcasts that I love listening to, and he was homeschooled, and then he was interviewing another person who also happened to be homeschooled, and they both were in college at 16, which starts to show like why is it so inefficient? Like what is that purpose? Like, that the system is dragged out for that long.
I didn't realize it before getting into doing Greenfields, but it's purposely slowed down. The learning design, the structure of it is meant to be slow for two reasons. One, to kind of like make sure that for people who got a C or whatever, it's spiraled back so that they're still trying to pick it up. But also nobody knows what to do with a 12-year-old high school graduate. Like there's a babysitting component that it's been labeled onto. And so like, I can tell you right now, you give me a neurotypical kid and I will give you a a bachelor's degree, at least by the time they're 18, right? The level of work that our middle school age kids are doing is high school level work. One of the debates that we're having right now is, you get a project badge, and then we have a project plus often, right? So it's like the above. And so we're thinking right now, if you're completing that project plus level in middle school, you're basically doing an AP level course. We're not going to give you college credit for it, but we'll give you a high school credit for it. For you to have to go through and repeat that again doesn't make any sense. Yeah. And so what we want out of high school is really the ability to go and just chase after what you want, right? There's graduation requirements from the state and all that stuff that we have to do too, but you can get through that stuff in 2.5, 3 years, super easy. That's without taking any middle school credit. Start taking college courses if that's what you want. We have built into our program called the Next Great Adventure, which is about really figuring it out, who you are, where your curiosities are, and how that applies to the outside world, right? We do a lot of that internally of like, who are you? What are your strengths? What type of person do you want to be? How do you want to relate to other people? What are the things that you're interested in and curious about? And we nurture that all the way through. But then by the time you're getting to high school, it's like, okay, well, how does this fit into what happens to me after high school, right? When I'm out in life and I'm outside of school. And so the program really walks you through that, those inventories about what you want to do, starts to line you up with different experiences. You go through and you find people who are in the industry, make phone calls to them, see if they let you shadow for a day or do an internship. So you can really get a sense of where it is that you want to go. And that's what should happen out of that. And if you find that like, hey, I need to go to college. I want to go to this college because this is what it's going to do for me. This is what I'm going to bring to it. That's a valuable piece. And, when I went to college, it was, I guess it's time to go to college. What should I do? And, and now it's, we have 3,500 colleges or something in the country, and everybody wants to go to 20 of them.
Yeah.
And that's just more of the same.
Well, and
bad mindset, fixed mindset.
I mean, it wasn't even a choice in my family. Like, if you want to go to college or not, it's like you're going to college, and then it's like, what grad school, law school, medical, things of that nature. And, so I went as far away to college as I could and dropped out after a year. And by the time I knew what I wanted to study in college, I had no desire to, continue going to college. I just wanted to, get out and go to India. And I wish I had the option of finding myself a little bit more clearly before investing all this time and money and energy, into an education, that I would have, if I knew what I really wanted to do at that point, if I had waited a few more years, I would have probably loved being in college and, studying, at that case, South Asian, studies and philosophy and Sanskrit and all sorts of stuff, which I ended up auditing later in my life because my teacher was a professor at the University of Rochester and let me go attend all of the, classes and, was able to study all those things. But if I knew at 19 or 20, I think it's so much pressure. Like, you're supposed to know what you want to do at 18, and we're going to put, $35,000 to $70,000 down a year. I didn't know. And so to have like built into a school, like a high school, like you actually get like this gap year as part of your high school. That's amazing. Cause then when I do go, or when a child does go and makes that choice for a college, they might not have to know everything, but they at least have a better sense of who they are and what kind of contributions into the world and what they want to study. And they've also been used to an education system where it's more fluid. It's not so much about, it might be your credit hours in college that determine, where you are as a freshman, sophomore, junior, high school, or senior, but it's not like your curriculum. Like, I love Greenfield's curriculum has a lot of fluidity where, an Explorer 1, which is where my son is, could do, work of different levels of Explorer. You just have to know, in order to move up, you have to get all of this done, and yeah, I'll attest they are doing some serious high school physics right now, and he would be what's considered 6th grade, and what he's learning, it's like insane. I'm looking at the equations going, yeah, I think I did that in 11th grade.
Well, thanks everybody for listening in to this episode of Education is Life, and we'll talk to you next time.